And good morning, good morning, good morning, Transformation Center. I am absolutely excited to be here this morning. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share with you all and be a part in collaboration with the Transformation Center, Pastor Patricia Winfield. And thank you, CT, for being such a gracious host on this morning. I am absolutely thrilled about what we're getting ready to dive into. I know that for many of you, this will be triggering, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing to be triggered because it brings forth healing. It helps us to understand where we are and where we're going. We are dealing with transforming our minds for the next two sessions. And I am excited because in order to transform our minds, we have to recognize our trauma. So we're going to have two sessions. The first session is going to talk about recognizing your trauma. That's this week. Next week, we are going to talk about building from your trauma. So we are going to dive in this morning. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to drop your questions. We will monitor those questions and answer them as we go. You're welcome to drop it in the chat box that's available under Transformation Center, and we will address everything that we can touch because we want to heal and grow together. So let's dig in. So the thing that we're talking about over the next 2 weeks is trauma, dealing with and recognizing your trauma and building from your trauma. I've had the opportunity to work with various people from various forms of life, and I have learned that trauma is one of those things that stops us in our tracks. No matter what form of trauma it is, it will stop you in your tracks. You will not, you will do things that necessarily you don't even know why you're doing. You don't know sometimes the root cause of why you act the way you act, or what's the reason why you do the things that you do. So this morning we're going to dig in a little bit and talk about five kinds of trauma that lead to other things in our life. Because a lot of times we don't even realize that we have trauma. So first thing I want to do is talk about what trauma is. Trauma is the individual trauma results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced in our lives, which is physical, emotional, harmful, or threatening to us, that causes us to have an adverse effect functioning in our physical and our emotional being. That means that something happened to us that causes us to struggle, to be stuck, to be confused, to be traumatized. That's, I know we're talking about trauma, but traumatized because of the event that happened. And there are three kinds of trauma. There's acute trauma, there is chronic trauma. Lord, I got it in my notes. There's acute, chronic, and progressive trauma. Listen to me. I want today to talk about five kinds of trauma. And I know you're going to say, what? I didn't know that was trauma, but it really is trauma. So the first one that we're going to talk about today is neglect and deprivation. Somebody says, what is that? What are you talking about? Neglect and deprivation, whether it is in the form of intentional or because of life circumstances, it does lead to trauma. So what is neglect? Neglect is the failure to care for someone properly. The failure to care for someone properly. Deprivation is the lack or denial of something that is considered a necessity. What does that look like in my everyday life? Neglect looks like a lack of food. It could be not having the attention that you needed as a child. It could be even as an adult, not having attention that you need as an adult from family and friends. Deprivation can be poverty. A lot of times people don't realize that dealing with poverty, that is a form of, it causes trauma. Somebody said, well, give me an example. Remember when we were young, some of us, where the lights got turned off, or we didn't have enough food. It wasn't that our parents didn't want to take care of us. They didn't necessarily have everything that we needed to be healthy and to survive. And so they did the best that they could. But do you know that that is traumatizing? Imagine coming home from school and there's no lights. Imagine coming home from school and there's no food. You don't know what you're going to eat the next day. And you know what happens when we experience those kind of things? As we get older, we make decisions. I'm never going to be hungry again. I'm never going to be without again. So we get into relationships and we do things that aren't necessarily healthy for us, but it's because of the vows that we made, because of those traumatic experience of being in lack. Somebody said, well, everybody's dealt with poverty before. Yeah, but we have made it so normal in our lives that we don't realize that it is trauma. Have you ever met someone that you went to school with, or a family member that never had just the necessities, food, clothing, and all of those things? And when they come to visit and you have the extra, they always want to take, they always want to gather, they always want to hold on to, they don't want to throw anything away. If you really be honest, if you look at situations with people that deal with hoarding, it's because of the lack that they experience, and that is traumatic. And most of the time people that deal with hoarding, if you dig to the core of it, it's because there was a lack, or there was a loss, there was something that was missing, which caused them to go over into that. So trauma shows up in many ways, but one thing that leads to trauma is neglect and deprivation. And we don't realize it because so many of us experience it in life, and we just think it's a normal part of life. Being in poverty, I saw my grandmother go through, I saw my aunt go through, I saw my uncle go through. So as we grow up, we may expect more, but because that's all that we've seen, we stay in a place of being stuck and dealing with lack. We may not be comfortable. We don't know how to move forward. So that is a place that trauma enters into our life, is through neglect and deprivation. Here's another one: life accidents and incidents. Somebody said, what does that look like? Life is lifing. So many things happen in our life on a daily basis that sometimes we just think is normal, but it is traumatizing. Life incidents is a sudden, unexpected accident or incident. A sudden, unexpected accident or incident. And we always associate that with a car accident. We always associate that with something happened, but it could be the loss of a job. It could be you lost your house. That's a life incident. You got evicted. It could be you got a demotion on your job. Those are traumatizing experiences. And a lot of times we just go through life and say, well, life is life. No, we have to stop and process these things that are happening to us so that we don't carry the trauma of it. What happens when you deal with life circumstances, you get used to bad things happening. And when you get used to bad things happening, you lose hope and you're not able to keep moving forward in the things in your life. So you go, well, that'll never work for me. That's a switch in your mindset that went off and said, bad things always happen. And it's because of the trauma of what you experienced. Imagine showing up at your job one day that you've been working at for 30 years and the doors are locked. And for church people, life is life. Imagine showing up at your church and the doors are locked. Imagine you got up this morning and you were driving and you thought everything was going to be well, and you come back and the house is burnt down. Those are life incidents and life accidents that happen that leave us in a traumatized state. And a lot of times we don't deal with it. We just get up and keep moving. I got to get up and survive. We got to find where we're going to live. But when did you stop to process the trauma of losing your job? When did you stop to process the trauma of losing your home? When did you stop to process the trauma of a car accident? I remember some years ago, my mom and I had went out of town and we had a really bad car accident. And in coming home, I thought I was fine. I didn't drive because I was still kind of recovering from the accident. And I absolutely thought that I was fine until I got behind the wheel. When I got behind the wheel and started driving, every time I saw a car light, I freaked out because I had not processed the trauma. All I did was allow my natural body to heal, but my mind hadn't healed from the fact that we had a car accident. So every time a car horn blew or I saw car lights, I was just petrified. And that is trauma. We oftentimes allow our physical body to heal, where we get up and we keep going, but we don't allow our mind to heal. And that's where the trauma just kind of sits and begins to cycle and creates other problems. Because you do know when you deal with trauma, it shows up in your body. It shows up in your body in the form of headaches, nightmares, confusing thoughts, protruding thoughts. It shows, well, I said protruding, intruding thoughts. All of these things are forms of and symptoms of trauma. But we keep going. When you experience certain situations and you notice that your sleeping pattern is off, that's trauma. Those are symptoms of trauma. It didn't just pop up out of anywhere. You never had problems sleeping and all of a sudden you're struggling and you're sleeping. Those are signs of trauma. We are recognizing our trauma on today. So we've talked about neglect and deprivation. We talked about life incidents and accidents. Here's a big one. Medical injury and illness will change your whole life. I can talk about this for hours. It is a situation that happens because of symptoms or signs or abnormal test results, or it could be a diagnosis of a medical situation. It could be something that happened. A leg was amputated, and somebody saying you are being extreme, but these are real life circumstances that happen. You could be diagnosed with cancer. Do you know that people have bad traumatic incidents when they're diagnosed with high blood pressure and diabetes because it was something that ran in their family and they saw loved ones pass away or loved ones have to go through treatments for these things, and when they get diagnosed, it's like the end of the world. I can speak on that personally. Listen, medical illness and medical injury creates trauma. We're not talking about the physical aspect of what you go through because of it. We're talking about the effect that it has on your mind. With me, I've dealt with a lot of infirmity and medical situations, and the doctors can tell me all day long I'm fine. But until my mind realizes that I am okay, I'm not okay. When you deal with medical injuries and medical illness and recognizing your trauma, you have to be honest with yourself and say things like, right now, I am afraid. When you get up and you just, I'm fine. I was famous for, I'm fine. It's just another part of my life. I'm fine. I'm going to get up from this. And those were the words that were coming out of my mouth. But my mind had not come in agreement with those words at all because I was very afraid. And when I was really okay, I was afraid to drive because I was scared that I was going to get sick while I was driving, or I was afraid to be left alone in the house. Let me tell you something. When you've dealt with sickness and you've had people around taking care of you the whole time or right there with you, when they leave and you're alone, you struggle being alone because you want to make sure somebody's there in case something happens. That is a traumatic experience. I remember the first time after I had open heart surgery, when I was left alone in the house for just 15 minutes, y'all. I'm sorry, this is real life. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I'm sharing life experiences and even the educational knowledge that I've received regarding trauma and all of these things. I remember I was left in the house for just 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. And I had to get up. I wanted to go to the bathroom. And I had done this by myself with people in the house so many times. But the minute no one was there and I wanted to get up to go to the bathroom, I was convinced that I was dying. I was convinced that I was having a heart attack. I was convinced that I couldn't get up and walk because I was completely traumatized that nobody was there and I had to get up and do this on my own. And was I physically capable of doing it? Absolutely. But mentally, my mind had not come to the fact that, girl, you okay, you can get up and you can move by yourself. Medical incidents and circumstances really create trauma in your mind because it holds you in a place of fear. Trauma opens the door to fear. Two things happen: fight or flight. When you're dealing with trauma, you're going to fight or you're going to run. You're going to fight or flight. And fight looks like you're going to fight to make sure that you're never put in this experience, in this place again of harm, of circumstance, of problem. And flight looks like you're going to run away from everything that comes near you, which is fear. And we have to be able to find a healthy balance when it comes to dealing and recognizing our trauma. First thing that we have to do is really recognize that something happened. And a lot of times we don't want to face it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to feel the emotions that's attached to it. But you cannot move forward until you feel the emotion. I'm not telling you that you have to stay there, but you have to address how you really feel about what has happened to you, what has occurred in your life. So let's talk about this next one. It's a really big one. It is very triggering to a lot of people, but we have to deal with it because it is one of the biggest places that trauma resides: domestic, physical, and sexual abuse. Yep, I'm talking about it today. Domestic, physical, and sexual abuse. It is a violation of abuse occurred in domestic situations, such as a marriage or a relationship. It is a physical assault, sexual contact, or even innuendos of sexual behavior. Sometimes we don't even realize that that's sexual abuse when someone is talking to you inappropriately and it makes you feel a certain way. And here's the thing about that. A lot of times we think that sexual abuse has to be physical. It does not have to be physical. It does not have to be physical. It can be a conversation. It could be the way that someone looks at you intentionally to make you feel violated and all of those things. And I'm not talking about just the blinking of the eye. I'm talking about we know when someone is violating us in an inappropriate way. And even the physical abuse, somebody hitting you, somebody doing inappropriate things to you, that is traumatizing. And a lot of times for us, it started in our childhood. Can we have real conversation today? It started in our childhood and we didn't address it, or our families didn't address it appropriately. So it led us over the course of years to be withdrawn. It led us to reject love, to reject the touch of a person. It led us to be afraid of people, paranoid when it comes to people because we don't know how they're going to handle us. That is trauma. That is prolonged chronic trauma. Remember I told you there are three kinds of trauma. There's acute trauma, chronic trauma, and complex trauma. Acute trauma is when something happens suddenly and it just throws you into trauma. Complex trauma is the occurrence of trauma, of something happen, an incident happened over a prolonged period of time, and usually that's what domestic and sexual and physical abuse look. It's a prolonged period of time. If it was something that happened one time, it might be acute. But when it comes down to complex trauma, it is something that this happened and then something else happened on top of it and something else happened on top of it. And a lot of times, a lot of us we start off by, it might be an acute incident. Like, for example, A life incident can be acute trauma, but poverty could be chronic. So chronic trauma. So we're looking at poverty and then physical abuse, and then throw in a medical incident that becomes complex trauma. So you have lots of things going on at one time, and we haven't dealt with any of it, which leads us to having all of these other symptoms and circumstances psychologically and physically showing up in our minds and in our bodies, because we have not recognized this was traumatic for me. I haven't told anybody. A lot of times when it comes down to physical and sexual abuse, domestic violence, we don't tell anybody. So the trauma is on the inside of us, and it's manifesting in our bodies with headaches, and it's manifesting in our bodies with stomach issues. If you deal with a lot of stomach issues and digestive problems, it's probably because there's some unresolved things going on. If you deal with a lot of nightmares and you don't know where they come from, go back and talk to somebody. Y'all know I'm big on talk to somebody. Get you some help. Go see it. I believe in therapy. I believe in prayer, but I also believe that we have people that are specialized in certain areas that can help us move forward in our life, and we not be stuck because of the things that have occurred in our lives that cause us to stand still. What I say, fight or flight. You're gonna either fight or you're gonna flight. And this is the funny thing about fight or flight. When you deal with trauma, you struggle so much with protecting yourself in that area of fight that you want to protect yourself. You don't trust anybody. So you block relationships or you sabotage relationships because you don't trust, because you have not recognized and dealt with your trauma. If you had mommy issues, you'd have problems with women in authority. If you had daddy issues, you either have problems with men in authority, or you are very subject to just accept men and accept the way that they treat you. And that is an area of fight or flight. When it comes down to the flight part of it, you run from everything. You run from confrontation. You run from just even standing up for yourself in the simplest form. And the sad thing about that I've learned over the years is when you don't stand up for yourself, you allow people to treat you any kind of way. You accept what they say about you, and you don't move forward because you never think you're good enough. That comes from trauma. We don't even associate these things. We're recognizing our trauma on this morning. Here's our last one that we're going to talk about, and it's a really big one: loss and grief. Loss and grief, and recognizing our trauma. We're just talking about the 5 things right now, just 5 areas that lead to trauma. Loss and grief. Listen, loss and grief. The loss is the fact or process of losing someone or something that you value. Grief is the natural emotional response to the loss of someone close, such as a family member or a friend. Can also occur after a sudden illness, a divorce, a bitter significant other significant loss. Sometimes we don't realize that. We just think, and I hate when people say this, death is a part of life. It absolutely is. It is truly, it is part of life. Life is but a vapor. But how do we handle the process of loss? How do we handle the process of grief? And a lot of times we don't handle it at all. We don't touch it. We just keep moving. And when it comes down to the trauma of loss and grief, we have to be able to stop and feel what we feel, because if we don't, life will force us to feel it. You cannot just listen. Let me make this so plain. You cannot lose your hand and act like you still have a hand, because the things that you used to do, you cannot do if you don't have that hand anymore. And that is the same thing when it comes down to losing family members and loved ones and friends. You cannot act like it did not happen. Not only can you not act like it did not happen, but you have to address how you feel about it. You cannot just walk around like nothing happened. That is internal torment and grief on the inside that causes severe trauma. It causes you to stop building relationships. It causes you to be fearful of losing other people around you. And we have to deal with it. That's the same thing with the loss of things and losing your home, losing your car, financial loss. Say you had a successful job and you always had money, you were always able to have the things that you need, and all of a sudden something happens and you don't have that job anymore and you don't have the money anymore, and we don't deal with that. That is a loss, a significant loss. It causes a lifestyle change. Loss causes lifestyle changes, whether it's a physical person or something tangible. It causes lifestyle changes, which is traumatizing. Imagine you went from living on your own, and you and your family had a house and y'all were doing really well, and something happened and you have to move in to live with that is absolutely traumatizing, not just to the children, but it's traumatizing to the parent, to the wife, to the husband, to the single mother. Imagine being a family of a family, husband, wife, and some children, and you lose your husband. That's traumatizing. It's a lifestyle change. We have to recognize trauma for what it is and not just think this is just part of life. My auntie went through it. My grandmother went through it. But you are not the same person as your auntie or your grandmother. You're not the same person as your uncle or your dad. You have to process your feelings, your emotions, your trauma, the way that it works for you. Just because somebody said, well, when I lost, I just went back to work. That may not be your story. I just stayed busy at work. No, that may not be your story. I just dug in and got some new friends. That may not be your story. You have to recognize what is traumatic for you and deal with it step by step. You cannot ignore it. There's no way you can ignore trauma in your life. And let me give you some examples of what it looks like, how the trauma shows up. It says that the trauma shows up in the form of sickness. So really, you could have been not having any medical situations, but because you lost your home, you started dealing with depression. You started dealing with high blood pressure because you were worrying all the time, and it led to some other issues. That's why we have to deal with our trauma. If you find yourself in relationship after relationship after relationship, not knowing why this keeps occurring, why do I keep having issues in relationships? Why can't I stay in a healthy relationship? Go back and trace where you've been in your life. I had a client once, I'll never forget this, and I talk about this often. I had a client, and I asked her, had she ever dealt with any trauma before? And she said no. And I said, okay. And maybe she hadn't. I didn't know. But here's the thing. When I said, well, start, tell me a little bit about your life and your family, she went down this list of things that had happened. And I'm looking at her like, baby, that's trauma. That's why you respond to things the way that you respond to things. Think about relationships that you've had. Are you able to live on your own? And I don't mean like live on your own in your own house, but what if you didn't have a lot of people around you? Are you needy? Those are symptoms of trauma. Being needy, being controlling, symptoms of trauma. You have to control your environment so that nothing bad happens to you, so that you don't struggle in certain areas of your life. That's trauma. You're not going to be able to control every aspect of your life. And if you try, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And that's why you see people deal with irritability because of traumatic experiences in their life. So let me go over these 5 that we talked about already. So the first one was neglect and deprivation. The second one was life accidents and incidents, medical injury and illness, domestic, physical, and sexual abuse, loss, and grief. Those are the 5 most common triggers of trauma. Can anybody identify? Does it make sense? If you went back over your life and started dealing with some of those things that have popped up in your life over the last few years, and wondering, where did this come from? Where did that come from? Having episodes of nightmares, having these memories pop up from when you were a child. What have you not processed properly to be able to move forward? And listen, let me tell you something about trauma. I want to share this story with y'all before I go into, because I'm going to give you a homework assignment for next week. So when I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer, and diagnosed with leukemia. But I had been sick for about a year before that, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. So they were treating me for all kinds of stuff, and I was always at the hospital, always at the doctor. But by the time they started treating me for the leukemia, the first round of chemo, I didn't really see any major effects. But maybe a month in the hospital that day, I was 12 years old. I was laying on the hospital bed, and I was laying on the pillow. Well, when I rose off the pillow, there was a lot of my hair on the pillow. And I was just like, oh my God. And so when I ran my hand through my hair, the hair was coming out in my hand. And I literally had a whole fit. 12 years old, y'all. Had a entire fit. Called my mom on the phone. I'm not leaving this hospital. You got to bring me a wig. And I didn't say bring me a hat. I didn't say bring me a scarf. I had saw the little kids that had cancer that wore those scarves and wore those hats. I didn't want to be that person. And I said, bring me a wig, and it got to look like what my hair looked like. So I remember she brought me this wig. I put the wig on. I was satisfied. I was 12 years old, and I put the wig on. Do you know that I was 42 years old when I stopped wearing wigs? 30 something years. 30 years of wearing a wig because of the trauma of losing my hair to cancer, but not being strong enough to say over the course of years, the hair doesn't make me. 30 years. And when I say 30 years of wearing wigs, this affected everybody in my life. So if I was 12 years old, my brothers were younger than me. So when their friends came over and knocked on the door, they couldn't come in until they made sure their sister had her wig on. They couldn't talk about their sister if they saw her without their wig on. This is what trauma does. It affects everybody around you. And then I got married. And when I got ready to get married, I would say, okay, how do you feel about this? And when in one of my marriages, my first marriage, I thought it was okay, but it wasn't okay. So that traumatized me for the next relationship. 30 years it took me to take a wig off because of one situation. It affected every area of my life. Come on, this is a laughing moment, but if I was in church and I wanted to praise God, I was worried as my wig was gonna fall off. How traumatic is that I can't even have a real worship because I'm worried about this one little thing that could possibly just, in my opinion, expose me. What was it exposing me to? Nothing really. A conversation. But that's what trauma does. It makes the situation so much bigger than what it is. And it becomes a mind shift. It becomes something so settled in your mind that you cannot move past it. And I will tell you, I never forget that day I took that wig off and to make sure that I didn't put it back on, I took it off and I posted pictures of me on Facebook. Because at that point, if Facebook saw it, it's out there now, ain't no taking it back. And it was one of the best decisions that I made, but it took me 30 years. to do it. It affected me even getting in a swimming pool. It affected so many areas of my life. I never forget, I rode in a convertible and I thought my wig was, this is funny, I thought my wig was going to blow off. So I never did it again. But when I got free and took that wig off, I did everything I wanted to do. I didn't care what I did. I still do everything I want to do. But that's what trauma looks like. It started at 12, y'all. And I was 42 when I took the wig off. But trauma will have you in a place for so many years, and it'll affect everybody around you. And you'll think that it's normal behavior, and it's not normal behavior. That's why we're dealing with the trauma. We want to be able to be free, be healthy, live productive lives in spite of what has happened to us. And next week, we're going to talk about how to build from trauma, because all of these things that I listed, we're going to match them with how we build outside of that. How do I overcome the fact of part of deprivation and neglect? How do I overcome the situation of medical illness and medical injury? How do I overcome physical abuse? How do I deal with it and not be traumatized? How do I build from this trauma? We're going to talk about it next week. But in the meantime, I do have some homework for you. So I have 2 little assignments that I want you to do. I want you between now and then to journal your thoughts and your emotions. Everything that we've talked about today. And if you go on the Transformation Center page, I'll drop the targets in there again. Journal your thoughts and your emotions about your experiences in these areas. If you've experienced anything in these areas, because they may not all affect you, but one of them might. And I want you to journal your thoughts and your emotions about how you feel about what happened to you, how you felt in that moment, how you feel about it now. Have I overcome it? Am I getting there? What can I do differently? Then the other assignment that I want you to do, and I really want you to do this. I don't have to see it, but I want you to do it for you. I want you to write yourself a survivor letter. Write a letter to yourself about everything you've been through and how you feel about surviving it. Because listen, you may say, I haven't survived it. Yes, you did. You're still alive. You're still living. You're still here. So even if you survive from day to day, you survive. Write yourself a letter about how you feel, about what you survived and the trauma that you survived. You're capable of doing it. And this letter is going to really let you see where you've come from and how far you've come. So those are my 2 homework assignments for you for before our next session. And we'll talk about it. If you want to talk about it in the next session, we absolutely will. We will talk about it. I'll have some exercises for you next week. And it's going to be good. I mean, some serious exercises. I think next week we're going to be on Zoom so we can kind of interact a little bit more. But I'm excited. Listen, recognize your trauma. It might be something that I didn't talk about today. And if it is, you're welcome to reach out if you want to talk about it. The Transformation Center is available. My information is out there. You are welcome to reach out to us as we prepare to heal the trauma and transform our minds. So I'm excited today for your time. Thank you so much, Patricia, for inviting me on. I am excited about our healing. We're going to heal together and we're going to transform our mind. But the first place we're going to start is recognizing our trauma. I look forward to seeing you next week. I am going to turn it back over into the hands of Patricia. You guys have a great and phenomenal rest of your weekend. This is Dr. DeAnna Morris.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Sorry, just got a little cold here. So listen, I don't know about you. I know that there are some of you that have questions. I've been watching and I've been following and seeing. So even though she's backstage right now, this is your opportunity to talk about the trauma, to talk about the trauma that you recognize this morning. I know I saw some folks that had to deal with the emotions. This is a safe place. I know it's on a Facebook Live, but let me tell you, it's a safe place because we're covered by the blood. It's a safe place because the speaker is covered. The speaker is anointed. There's intercessors right in the background. And we're here to help you recover from your trauma. So if you got questions, you have a trigger, and you want to talk to someone, if you don't want to talk to someone here, if you don't want to ask your questions here, listen, there's the Transformation Center has a private group, messenger group, and you can go in and put your questions there. You can reach out to Dr. Morris or myself. We're here. Our goal is to help you transform. We want you to have visible, sustainable change in 2024, starting with our minds, starting with our past, starting getting past the life challenges that we constantly have. This is your opportunity to say, I'm ready to be changed. I'm not going further. Today is January the 20th, 20 days within the first of the year. And I declare that I am not going to be the same in 2024. I declare that my mind and the trauma of my experiences will not continue to keep me in bondage and bound because I won't face them. Today, I make a declaration that I will be changed. And listen, I know that Dr. Morris gave an awesome presentation. Sow into this mighty woman of God. Sow into what you see, what you experience into her life, and what God is getting ready to do for the next session. Again, any questions? I know that there are some questions, some concerns, anything you want to talk about. Maybe she didn't go over a topic or say something about a trauma that you want to talk about. This is an opportunity that you can ask that question. And I don't know about anybody else, but when she said write a survivor letter to yourself, ooh, Apostle Johnson, that began to resonate in my own heart. How I survived the trauma. And you got to make that personal. I can't wait to see everyone just think about those journals, because something about writing things down, it becomes freeing. Writing reminds you that it is free. You get to see it in print. You get to declare it. And here's another thing that you can do once you write it, you can burn it. You don't even have to keep it. You can say, you know what, I'm going to write. You don't have to share it. I'm going to bring Apostle DeAnna back up. I just want to make sure, as I'm saying some of these things, that we are in agreement with this. Listen, just like Apostle Johnson just said, it is a form of release. Whenever you write something down, you get rid of it. You have to make sure that you don't hold on to those things that you said you release out of your mouth. And sometimes we say it out of our mouth, but it's still in our heart. And so that's how we keep reliving the traumas. And so
absolutely.
Write it down. Even if you need to destroy it, there are people I know that are afraid to write things down because they are afraid somebody is going to read it. Not anymore. You're declaring today that you will be free from the trauma of addiction.
Yes.
The trauma of past pains, not even just the trauma of other people, but the trauma that you've inflicted upon yourself. Do you realize that sometimes we have self-inflicted trauma because we won't deal with issues, we won't deal with things that come up?
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Not only that, one of the common mistakes that we make, and I think we do this because of shame, we won't even look in the mirror and face ourselves. I for a long time, because of some of the things that I had experienced in life, not necessarily things that other people had done for me, but things that I had accepted for myself. I would walk past the mirror, or I would do all these things, and somebody, this is gonna sound fun to somebody. I would literally put my makeup on, get dressed, be all in the mirror, and never looked at myself. How about that?
Wow.
I would get completely dressed, put full of makeup and eyeshadow, and never look at myself in the mirror. Look at what I was creating. Look at the image that I was presenting, and never looked at me, because I had issues with me, issues with the decisions that I had made, issues with things that I had done, issues with things that had happened to me. And I never forget, and even in telling the story about the wig, it was after I had taken the wig off and just hanging out and doing little stuff. One day I was in the mirror, and I stopped and just started looking at myself. I mean, like literally, like, look at me, you know. And it was life changing, because there's nothing to hide behind.
Mm.
This is who I am. I'm that person that made that mistake. I'm that person that accepted that behavior. I'm that person that did that crime. Come on, let's talk real talk today. I'm the one that did the crime. And I ain't talking about oh, I stole a piece of candy. You know, we done did some stuff. And with our holy self, won't even identify that we did that. And then you kind of be scared that it's gonna come up later on when your old friends show up and say, you remember when we I don't remember that. But we won't even face that stuff. And it's real. We did it.
Yes, it's
And that is traumatizing. We have to recognize we are who we've been, and get past the place of where we've been and be who we are now. But you can't do that until you deal with the real you.
I wanted you to say that again. We are who we've been. That right there is enough. But sometimes, we get past our past, but yet we don't deal with it. And so we got to recognize that it is a part of who we are, but it doesn't mean that it's a part of who we've been. It doesn't mean it's going to be a part of who we are. And in order to get past it, you still got to deal with
it. Yes.
Yes. It's part of who you are, who you were, the things that you did in your past. It doesn't say that's who you are today, because we know that people will hold us to our past. But once you recognize, yes, that was me. Yes, I did that. Yes, I behaved that way. But today, through the blood, through the change, through the process, because we understand that transforming our minds is a process. It is not something that happens overnight. It doesn't happen like this.
Let me tell you something that I tell people all the time, and they laugh at me, and I mean it. You ain't gonna be better at telling on me than I'm gonna be better at telling on myself. Because you're not gonna hold nothing over my head. You ain't God. And he know, I done talked to him about it. You're not gonna hold me in bondage over something that you heard. If I did it, I did it. And I'll tell people quick, God forgave me. I repented to God. He forgave me. And if you holding on to it, you're gonna miss God while you trying to judge me.
Amen. Amen. I want to address what Apostle Johnson put up here that's on the screen, that continuous dialogue that we have within ourselves that keep us in those dark places or brings us to the light of who you truly are. It's the conversations that you're having with yourself. As you gave your testimony, and I can only imagine, at a young age, the conversations you were having with yourself was either going to keep you in that place, in that dark place, or it was going to bring you into the light of God. And I'm sure that even at that age, and even as you grew up, God, why me? Why? Because that's our plea, that's our cry to God in our trauma.
And the other part about trauma is when you don't deal with your trauma and you don't face all of those areas of insecurity, because trauma leads to insecurity. When you don't face it, you start projecting it on other people. You don't know, like as a young girl, even, losing the hair is one thing. But then you around all these friends who have their hair, they getting weaves and they doing this. We talking 12 years old, all the way up to I'm 42 years old. My girlfriend's getting all these different hairstyles. They over at this hair salon. Do you know I had a problem going into the beauty salon?
Wow.
If they would, that's not I don't go with you there. Cause I don't belong in here. I don't fit in here. And those were the thoughts that I would have in my head. I mean, countless hours of trying this beautician to do this and do that, and it come out looking crazy. And now I got to deal with what people are gonna say about that. And the thoughts would be, nobody's gonna accept you. You don't belong here. This is not for you. And it's something as simple as hair. We're not even talking about losing a limb. We're talking about some hair, y'all. And when trauma hits a person, it doesn't matter if your trauma is medical illness and my trauma is poverty or a lack of food. Guess what? You know how people go from when they're young and they have a lack of food, and you see people that deal with obesity. And I'm not talking about like just, obese. I'm talking about extreme obesity, my 600-pound life kind of stuff. It's because there was a lack of food. And they made a vow. Hear what I'm saying. They made a vow. I'll never be hungry again. I'm going to always eat what I want. Like, that's my testimony. I'm telling y'all the truth. I'm going to eat what I want. Anybody that know me know. I'm going to eat what I want. But it has nothing to do with that. I'm just greedy. But they make this vow that I'm never going to be without. I'm never not going to have what I want. So they start eating. They start eating. And they keep eating. Because this is my satisfaction to my trauma as a childhood. I couldn't eat when I wanted to eat. So nothing is going to stop me from eating when I want to eat. I didn't have the clothes that, come on, you look, let's talk about these people's closets. Let's talk about this shoe fetish. Help me, Jesus. Help me, Lord. I always wanted good shoes. I'm never going to not have shoes. My friends always had shoes. I'm not saying that's where it came from, because my mama likes shoes too, so it might be inherited, but I'm just saying. But there are certain things that happen in our life, and we make these vows to ourselves, and they follow us. They follow us. And it's not because they were healthy vows, they were survival vows.
Wow.
Because of trauma. Nobody's ever going to violate me again. So we are very aggressive, very standoffish, very mean. You don't approach me. The person trying to come and be nice to give you, what you giving me lunch for? I'm not going to let anybody take advantage of me. That's what you said. When they said, I just wanted to buy you lunch. What you trying to give me lunch for? Because basically what you said is, I'm never going to let anybody use me. I'm never going to let anybody close enough to trick me with some food. And you know how that happens? When you dealt with a molestation and somebody gave you a piece of candy. I don't want nobody to give me nothing. That's what it looks like later on in life.
That's true.
The piece of candy drew you in. They violated you sexually. And now as an adult, when somebody tries to give you something, you think your mind goes back to that trauma. They gave me something, so they're going to take something. That's what trauma makes us do.
Yeah.
That's how we respond.
At one point, it always feels like everything cost us something.
That's it.
Everything cost us. If no matter what relationship you're in, you think back, everything cost us. If I did this, it was going to cost me to do something. If I did this for you, it cost me. Everybody had a motive. And that's what happens in the trauma, is that what is their motive? Why did they do it? As you were talking about the clothing, it's just funny because I never thought about this with trauma. This is transparency for me. I have way too many clothes, y'all. Way too many clothes. And let me think. I have 5 sisters. So I received a lot of hand-me-downs until I got too big and nobody wore the same size. But then I got hand-me-downs from my mama. So that was a whole nother trigger right there. But now I have clothes, excessive amount of clothes. Why? Because I never wanted anybody else's hand-me-down.
That's what it looks like.
That is exactly what it looks like.
That's what it looks like. That, and we don't even understand the behavior. We don't understand the behavior. I'm gonna use my mama, and she might be on here. She might get me later for this, but I'm gonna share this. So my family know ain't nothing off limits. So my mom grew up in a small town in Mississippi, very, very, very small town. In the area that we grew up, because I even lived there too as a child. And the area that we grew up in is a very poverty-stricken area. And so, but my mom didn't live in the town; she lived like on the outskirts of the town. And they grew up very poor. And my mom was a seamstress from the time she was 9 years old. She's always made clothes and all of that, all of our clothes, friends' clothes, prom dresses, wedding dresses, everything. So when my mom, over the years, we left that state and moved to Georgia, and my parents established a life for us, and we had a very good life. And we had regular life struggles, but we had a good life. And my mom had a good job. My dad had a good job. So a few years ago, my mom just, over the years, we kind of got used to my mom buying stuff. She just bought stuff, just always had stuff. If our friends had an apartment, my mama could furnish their whole apartment because she always had stuff. So a few years ago, we were doing something, and my younger brother and I were talking to her, and she said, we were talking about something. She said, I want that, or I'm going to get that. And she was like, I always wanted one of those. And she would go buy this stuff. What you gonna do with that? Well, what we realized was when you grow up in poverty and you couldn't buy and you couldn't have, your mindset is, now that I can, I'm gonna get everything that I want. And so one day we said to her, do you realize that you have arrived? And your mind doesn't trigger. You don't have to do that anymore. You have arrived. I mean, and it's not to say that in a bragging way, because arriving to somebody is one thing, arriving to somebody else is another thing. But she was in a place where you really can't have what you want, but you don't need that. You ain't got to prove it to anybody. You don't have to. You're not in a place of poverty that you have to, I got to get it because I might never, ever be able to get it again. Lady, you can get what you want. And you can throw that old stuff away. I remember my brother brought her a brand new TV because the sound in her TV had gone out. So when he took the TV down, he got ready to throw it away. She didn't want to throw it away.
Wow.
She wanted to keep it and put it in the sunroom. And I said, why? And she was like, because I could play it in my sunroom. And I said, Mom, throw it away. I said, we'll buy you another one, throw it away. But we literally had to argue with this lady to throw a TV away that had no sound when she had 5, maybe 3 or 4 TVs in the house already. You just got a brand new TV, throw the TV away. But that's what trauma looks like. That's how it shows up. And we miss it because we just think this is everyday behavior. That's not healthy. Correct. And if we don't talk about it, we don't realize that it's not healthy.
One of the things I think that also inspired me to make sure that we talk about the trauma that's in our minds is being in a conference with you and recognizing some trauma that I had experienced, that I had not come out of and not had dealt with. And so, and it only gets triggered by certain things, not even you don't think about it. And so I want to encourage you guys, truly ask questions, message Dr. Morris, message myself, put it in the transformation center, whatever it is, because trauma happens daily. And we don't always recognize it unless it's our trigger. Because our triggers, I just kept realizing during that particular conference, I became a pastor. I'm just going to talk myself. I became a pastor. Becoming a pastor, then my brother died, like immediately. My apostle was going to another state to replant. So that means I was left with no support. I didn't have time to grieve my brother. I had to get in position. So that's trauma on top of trauma. Within that, in the last 5 days, I lost 2 more relatives. Not only did I lose them, but I preached the eulogies. And so instead of dealing with the trauma, I masked it. You put on that invisible mask. I don't have any makeup on today to cover up all my flaws, but that's what we do. And I want everybody to get free. I want you to be able to have visible, sustainable change in dealing with whatever that transforms your life to be. I saw someone that says the memories were coming back. So I want you to address that, Dr. Morris. How do you, during this session, any session, as they hang up and somebody comes back to the replay and the emotion starts to come back, I need some suggestions because we can't get to them as fast as we're going to need to.
Yeah. When those memories come back, and they do. Trust me. I say this, I usually open these sessions like this. You're going to be triggered. There's no way that you won't be triggered sitting in a session like this. But one of the things that I tell people is feel what you feel. That's why I gave that assignment of writing and journaling your thoughts and your emotions. And listen, let me add this. Sometimes you can't even write it down and journal it. Sometimes you literally have to draw a picture. And somebody say, I don't even draw. You draw shapes, you draw objects, you draw whatever comes to your mind. When the memories come back up, I don't want you to get stuck in the memory. I want you to deal with what you feel in that moment and forgive. And if you can't do it by yourself, reach out to somebody you can trust, not just anybody. You don't want somebody to come in agreement with your pain. Yeah, they should have did you like that. No, they shouldn't have, but we got to get up from here. So when the memories come back up, the first thing I want you to do is deal with what you feel in that moment and what happened. And if you have to write it down, draw it, whatever, record it. Sometimes let me give you a trick. This is something that I used to do. Go in a room in the dark, put your phone on record or whatever, and start talking out loud. You don't even have to record it. For me, I need to record it because I need to know what I said. Because I get emotional and I miss some stuff that I said and I need to go back and deal with it. But for other people, go make sure nobody's around. Go in the room in the dark and just start talking out loud about everything you feel. Get in the shower. While you're in the shower.
That's my place.
Get in the shower, say it out loud, say it under your breath. If you feel like crying, cry with the water on your face. You don't know whether it's tears or the water from the shower. Just let it out. Let it go down the drain. And then here's a big one. If you know it's bigger than you, seek some help. Reach out. There's nothing wrong with going to therapy. I go to therapy. I was listening to Pastor Patricia when she was talking about the loss. Whew. Some of y'all know my story of grief, and I'm doing this series on grief. I had such significant loss over a 7-year period that I still wonder, how am I in my right mind with all of this? But I'm telling you, get some help. It's okay. Even and Pastor Patricia will tell you this. If you come to me and I'm trying to help you and it's beyond my scope, what I tell you, I can refer you to somebody that can really help you because this is beyond what I'm capable of doing. I'm big on that. So even if you're triggered and the memories come up, don't ignore them. Please don't ignore them. Don't swallow it back down. You know how we go, then take it back. I ain't taking nothing back. It came up. It's got to go. It can't dwell in my heart. It can't dwell in my mind. And the peace that you feel when you release this stuff, you sleep better. The tension in your body is gone. All of that kind of stuff. Because it shows up in every capacity. So please, if the memories come up, allow them to come up. Address them. Don't act like they didn't come up. Cry. Can I tell you that? Man, have one of them good old cries when you know everything coming out. Let it come out. That's purging. Let it come up and come out. Man, you feel so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, take it from me. I have moments. I cry at night. I cry. People ask me, do you ever cry? All the time. You just don't see it.
Right.
But yeah, just deal with that. Don't act like you didn't feel it. Don't act like that didn't touch you. And you're like, oh, that's what's up. But because let me tell you the first thing we do. Man, such and such needed to hear this. No, you needed to hear it.
That's reflecting.
Yep.
We have a tendency to reflect our trauma to other people, other situations, so that we don't have to deal with it. And so that's very true. It makes it easier, but it doesn't change the trauma. It doesn't change the impact. We still have the situation that has happened in our lives, but we just haven't dealt with it. We just reflected on somebody else. Right. And then we often get angry with them because they don't deal with them, but you won't deal with you.
That's good.
We get angry when people don't deal with the stuff that is going on in them. But when you look in the mirror, really that same thing is you. And that's how you recognize it. We recognize certain things in individuals because it is on the inside of us, but we just haven't dealt with it. We only see their part and not us. And so we have to make sure. We have to make sure that. So here's questions for you. Dr. Morris, will you be addressing those who are dealing with others who are trapped in trauma but are not ready to acknowledge and deal with it?
Yes, we could talk about that next week, because let me touch this right here. You can't make a person touch it. You cannot make, if they're not ready, you cannot make them. But the other thing you cannot do is spend a lot of time. What's the word I want to use? You cannot spend a lot of time. This is for a lack of a better word coming to my mind. Pampering them or soothing their trauma. Because when a person is dealing with trauma, when you patting on them, oh, it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. It keeps them in that place even longer. You have to let them deal with it, but you can't wear yourself thin trying to make them deal with it, if that makes sense. So there are people that just don't want to touch it, and you cannot force them to. So absolutely. And we'll dig a little bit deeper in that next week when we talk about building from these areas, because it's a choice to build.
Wow. Did y'all hear that? It's a choice to build. It's a choice to be healed. It's a choice to be delivered. It's a choice to recover. It's a choice to recognize our trauma.
I know some people, I know some seniors that are in their 70s and 80s, and they have had some situations to happen in their younger life or throughout life, and they've been told the truth of the situation. Hear me when I say told the truth of the situation, but still will not face it. And you can still see the residue and the behavior that is related to the original trauma, which means they will stay at the original trauma, but they will not deal with the truth of it. They'll bypass what they know to be true to go back to the original incident.
That's deep bedded trauma right there. That's really deep bedded trauma. So Dr. Morris, before we close out today, I didn't see any additional questions that anyone had. I wanted to make sure that we answered all of you all's questions, But I want to thank each and every one of you. I want to thank those who sold into Dr. Morris. I want to thank you for taking the time out, for sharing. Listen, share with someone. Go to the Transformation Center and make sure that you join us so you can see what's going on. This month, Dr. Morris is talking about transforming your mind. Next month, we're talking about transforming your words, because words have power.
Mm-hmm.
So we will have guest speakers for those sessions as well. But I'm excited about what God is doing in the Transformation Center. And again, it's not just about your spirituality, it's about your mind, it's about your body, it's about your business, it's about your ministry, it's about your spiritual life, it's about your personal life, it's about you. Transformation is
Mm-hmm.
a metamorphosis for you to take active participation. This is not for people to come up here and share information and you all just put it on a shelf. This is for you to actively participate in the change that you want. Because in order
Mm-hmm.
to have sustainable change, you're going to have to actively participate.
That's right.
Again, I
That's
just
right.
thank Dr. Morris. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Next week, next Saturday at 10 a.m., we will be back here. We will be Zoom. So listen, go to the Transformation Center. That's where the Zoom link will be posted. Of course, it will be posted on some other pages. Make sure that you all look out for the Zoom. It also will be pushed to Facebook, but Zoom, if you want to be there up close and personal and really ask those questions, get that homework done. Make sure that you do the homework for yourself. It's not about her. It's not about me. It's about for us doing this personal. Everything that is happening is personal so that we can get to the place, not just where we desire to be, but I believe the place where God desires for us to be. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do some work.
Mm-hmm.
Have to do some
Mm-hmm.
work. So journal your first assignment. Let me go ahead and put that up there. That was journal your thoughts and your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had to write that survival letter to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely is for you personally. But I want to thank you guys again. I really appreciate each and every one of you for joining us today. I thank you for just being here. Dr. Morris, I thank you for the
Yes.
time, because I know that you are away. I know that you're at home with the family. And so for her to take the time out to spend time with us and share with us, that means that this was important to her. This wasn't just something that I just thought of and wanted to do. This was something that she felt that needed to be done and needed to be said. So I just want to thank you guys. I thank you for all that you're coming. And again, have a wonderful Saturday. It is 11:20 on Saturday, and I cannot do nothing else. But I'm going to have Dr. Morris do a plug for her church, and I'll do a plug for New Life.
Amen. Listen, I'm excited about what God is doing in the lives of His people. I welcome you guys to visit us at the ministries at 3657 Speaks Drive in Midlothian, Virginia. Pastor Serenity Price is the pastor. I am Apostle DeAnna Morris, the overseer of the ministries. We are attending to the needs of people, and we believe what we pray. So if you don't have a place of fellowship or looking just for a word from the Lord, you can meet us there on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Again, that's the ministries at 3657 Speaks Drive, Midlothian, Virginia. We would love to have you. God bless you.
Amen. Amen. And of course, listen, New Life Ministries of Petersburg, where the pastor is Pastor Tracy Manley, my friend, overseer, part of New Life International Fellowship. Listen, if you're not in that place, you don't have another church home, a place to go, meet them there at 2568 Stedman Drive, where everybody has a place. We are your kingdom connection in the earth realm. Join us. I'm not saying that I'm going to be there. I am still battling this cold. Thank you, darling, for feel better. And I don't want to give this germ to anybody. But listen, they will be in the house. They're looking forward to you coming everywhere, between the ministries, between New Life of Petersburg, New Life International, Moorhaven, wherever you are, go and see and have a time with God tomorrow. As you're enjoying your family today, we want to thank you again for coming to the Transformation Center. We want to thank you for the opportunity to pour and to hear from God and this great woman of God, that God is giving great insight in dealing with trauma and addressing the issues that we don't want to deal with. That's the issue that we will have with the Transformation Center. We'll talk about the difficult conversations, the things that nobody wants to talk about, the things that we need to talk about so that we can be healed. So the Transformation Center is to transform you into through a metamorphosis that you will not know who you are. You know, the caterpillar went in. He didn't recognize himself when he came out as the butterfly because he went through a transformation. The goal is for you to go through a transformation that you will not recognize, and neither will the other people around you. Have a great day, and let's go and be transformed, everybody.